Well, hello. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about last week's discussion forum that you guys had. So I just want to say that I thought the discussions that were going on online were fantastic. Just there's a lot of thought and depth. You could see that a lot of people had done some good research to inform their opinions. Really good questions were being asked, sort of amongst yourselves. So that was really a high quality discussion, I felt. Now, so we're doing online classes. Now, if you're taking classes in the summer, I think, this is an example of the work that you need to do, right? If you're taking classes in the summer, a lot of the discussions go online, and there's a lot of these online discussion forums. And the quality of the discussion that I saw this last week is exactly what you need to aim for. So for you guys that were participating in it, if you're taking classes in the summer, I think you guys are in good shape. So let's debrief a little bit about the discussion questions. I talked a little bit about, or I was asking questions about supply chain disruptions as well as, stockpiling inventory for disasters. So with the supply chain disruptions, a great discussion, great, you guys did some good research and found, some ways that we can protect ourselves or companies can protect themselves from these types of supply chain disruptions. For example, having multiple suppliers in multiple different countries throughout the world, having local suppliers as well as international suppliers, things like that. Being able to try to moderate demand. If you have a supply chain disruption, you can try to moderate demand to kind of open some space or to move demand towards supplies that you do have a good supply chain in place for. Those are great ideas as well. Let's see here. So in terms of challenges like that, what are the challenges that people face? I think over the next few years, I think we're going to see some big changes in our supply chains. And if you're looking for a good career, I think getting into supply chain management, you're going to have some pretty good jobs, some job opportunities if you get into supply chain management over the next couple of years. But there are some very real challenges to responding to these types of, or to create supply chains that can withstand these types of disruptions. And what I find interesting is that the world received a warning about this years ago, back in 2011, with the earthquake, tsunami, and the Fukushima nuclear reactor meltdown in Japan. We saw every supply chain that had Japanese components in it was basically stopped and went offline for a couple of months. So like we had warning of these potential types of disruptions from natural disasters, and we did nothing about that. And so here we are in 2010 with COVID shutting everything down. Is like a huge, much bigger issue than the Fukushima disaster in Japan was, like because it's more global. And we're struggling with it. And one of the challenges we see with that, like everything we need to do to create a diversified supply chain that can withstand these types of natural disasters, is that it costs. It costs money. It raises the expenses. Instead of being able to just have one or a small select number of suppliers in one country, that's efficient. It's easy to manage. It's efficient. You can find the lowest cost supplier. All these things, so you can get some really great cost efficiencies when you focus on one. Diversifying, it increases your costs. You have multiple supply chains that you need to manage, and you need to test and to make sure that they're working up to standards and things like that. So these all have costs. These will all increase the cost base. Like it costs money to be able to be prepared for disasters. Disaster preparation costs money. Now, the fact that we've all just experienced COVID-19 or in the middle of experiencing it right now, like we're all going to be willing to pay the cost. But as the years go on between this disaster and the next one, as years go on and we get complacent again, there's going to be this temptation to let's try to lower our costs. One company is going to do it. One company is going to undiversify their supply chain to try to limit their costs. They'll get lower costs. Other companies will sort of jump in on top of that as well. So you see this pressure, when there's time between disasters, we get complacent, and so we need to develop systems and mindsets that protect against that, right? So I think that's one of the things that we as a society, you as business students, we as business educators, we need to start making you more aware of that, creating this mindset that, it's worth spending a little bit of extra money to prepare for these natural disasters, because these natural disasters do happen, right? Um, Okay, so in terms of stockpiling, right? I've been reading reports where people are like, "Oh, we should have all this PPE on hand. We should have all these ventilators on hand. We should be stockpiling this kind of stuff there." And again, you guys had a really great discussion about why that's not feasible. Lots of discussions like there's an opportunity cost. All the money that we spend buying all this excess equipment that we just stick in a warehouse, all that money being spent could be spent improving our healthcare system, buying new hospitals, training new healthcare workers and stuff like that, right? There's an opportunity cost to stockpiling equipment. Plus, another point that a lot of you people made was that this equipment has a shelf life, right? Technology becomes obsolete. You can store all these N95 masks, but what happens when like next year N96 masks come out and your N95 masks are sort of old school and obsolete now, right? Like technology advances, and so you have these holding costs of obsolescence and just equipment breaks down and needs maintenance. So again, you might not be able to stockpile as much as you like. Another thing that wasn't mentioned in the discussion forums, but I think is very real, is that we have no idea what equipment we need for whatever future disaster comes down the road, right? Like for COVID, we need ventilators and PPE. What if the next thing that comes down the road needs something completely different? You need something that sticks in your ear or something like that. Who knows? We don't know what the next disaster is going to be. We don't know what equipment we're going to need. So like, how do we stockpile for it, right? Like when the thing actually happens, we're like, oh, we should have had this equipment, but we don't know ahead of time what equipment we're going to need. So what do we stockpile, right? So personally, let's talk about the solutions here. So let's talk about the solutions. So I think we can't necessarily anticipate what the next disaster is going to be and what we're going to need. We can't necessarily stockpile all of the potential equipment for all the reasons that you've said. There are these pressures in terms of supply chains. And everything else. There's all these pressures to reduce costs, and the longer the time span between natural disasters is, the more we become complacent and focus on costs versus preparation. But I think there's two sources of solutions to this problem, right? One of the sources I think some members in the discussion forum actually said, right? So I'll talk about my source that wasn't said, and then I'll talk about the source that you guys were talking about in your discussion forum. So one of the things I think we need, like we can't stockpile stuff reasonably. We don't know what we're going to need for what the next disaster is. So I think we need to create responsive and adaptable systems, right? Systems that can respond quickly and that they can adapt. And for example, at KPU, within 1 week, we went from in-class classes to online classes. That's, you got to admit, like it's not perfect. It didn't look pretty, but we did it, and we did it in a week. That's pretty responsive. That's pretty adaptable. And we got that way because we had all this infrastructure in place. We were using it for a bunch of other things, but we could use that infrastructure to adapt quickly to a new situation. And I think that's what we need with our supply chains. That's what we need with our manufacturing, with our businesses. The more we can create adaptable systems and responsive systems, instead of just locking in on this is how we do things, sort of create systems that we know, like this is how we do things, but they could be, we could change and we could shift on the fly as we need to. So creating these adaptive, diversified systems, creating the technology infrastructure and the training so that people can kind of make these changes on the fly, I think is important. And the other thing I think is important for defending ourselves and responding to these types of situations was something that I think a student mentioned in the discussion forums there. And it's that we actually have power ourselves to help our society respond to this, right? There's a lot, these things, when people are saying like, oh, hospitals should have been prepared, oh, government should have been prepared, really, a lot of that sentiment comes from, oh, somebody else needs to save me. Like they need to take responsibility for me. The government needs to take responsibility for me. The healthcare system needs to take responsibility for me. Somebody else needs to save me. And I think as long as we have that attitude, as long as we have the attitude that somebody else needs to save me, then we're lost, right? The thing is like COVID and natural disasters and things like, like world events attack our society. They attack our society as a whole. COVID attacked our society as a whole. Um, and when something attacks our society as a whole, you're a part of society. I'm a part of society. We're all a part of this society. We all have a role to play. We all have our responsibilities here, right? And so the healthcare system has a role in responding to this. The governments have a role in responding to this, but so do you and so do I, right? And our job here with COVID-19, as somebody said, is to stay at home. We have power whether our actions contribute to the solution, staying at home and slowing down the spread, or our actions have the power to contribute to the problem, going out, getting sick, spreading the disease around, right? We have power to save our society as well. It's not that other people need to save us, it's that we also have a role to play in taking actions that save our societies. We need to take some ownership and some responsibility for ourselves, our own actions, because we're a part of this society and our actions matter, okay? So those are just my two thoughts, or a couple of thoughts on this discussion forum. Great discussion forum. I'm sorry that I sort of messed up with the Atom presentation. I didn't have the link there, but hopefully that's getting straightened out, and hopefully we'll have some really great discussions there too. So I'll see you on the discussion forums. Good luck and keep slugging away.